Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm John, and I'm back up here so quickly because I've had 0 pies and cakes since last.
Oh.
Just kidding. We're going to have our first hymn. It's worship and song number 5, Holy, Holy, Holy. So this is our time for announcements. First, this is a reminder to turn your cell phones off of the Wi-Fi or put them on airplane mode or turn them off altogether, whichever is easiest for you. We're going to start with our friends on Zoom. If anyone has any announcements, please share. We'll open it to any announcements for those of us in the room. Oh, and make sure you announce yourself.
It's okay. In Anita's absence. What's this about? The monthly meeting for the purpose of business will convene at 7 p.m. this evening. Please join us.
Oh God, as we gather here this morning, our hearts join together in common love and purpose. We pray, oh God, that our world be similarly joined. For we confess our expertise at division, at separating ourselves from those who do not look like us, who do not think like us, who do not have what we have. Oh God, we are masterful at such distinctions. We pray, oh God, first in our own hearts, that we might master that which we proclaim, a healing, a taking from us the privilege and blessing we feel. Which serves only to separate us from those who are not like us. And so, oh God, beginning with us, make our hearts and our minds and our spirits fully appreciative of others. Let us see in our brothers and sisters your holy image, your desires, your longing for justice and peace. Let us see in those who struggle where we would be if we were not born when we were to who we were. So that we might stop thinking of others as deserving and others less so, but see them instead as all your children, needing and longing for the same things, the same hopes, the same dreams. Place in our hearts, oh God, such deep compassion, so that our love for others is evident and obvious, so others never have to guess which side we are on, never have to guess what we value and what we don't. But see in us and in our community here only good, only hopeful, only committed to that to which you are committed. This is our prayer this first day, O God, to every day be more like you. Amen. Well, I've asked two young at heart people to gather food for us for Kunat.
For our centering thought, I want to share some thoughts about the nature of friendship. Many Americans are facing what's called a friendship recession. That's the term Daniel Cox, a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, uses to describe this rise in the number of people who lack a certain number of close friends. There are some studies that suggest that being without a close friend, that being lonely, is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. But alarmingly, 15% of young people today report having no close friends, and that's compared to 3% back in the 90s. Several factors can get in the way of friendships. People move away for jobs and opportunities. Parents are spending more time on parenting. There's this culture of workism, which is a sense that your identity is so wrapped up in your work that you don't have time and energy for friends. So it's important that we pay attention to what's very often an underappreciated human relationship, the friendship. Friendship was something that the philosophers like Aristotle used to take very seriously, even considering friendship as the ideal relationship. And one of the reasons why friendship is so important and so idealized is because it's a relationship of genuine and radical equality, one in which you're not in the friendship in order to get something out of it for yourself. There's no sense of dependency. There's no sense of exchange. It's not transactional. Many other relationships do contain some kind of transaction, some kind of what's in it for me. But the definition of friendship is a relationship where there is nothing in it for you other than the relationship itself. And as Quakers, the idea of genuine and radical equality deeply resonate with us. In the Message translation of the Bible in John chapter 15, Jesus says, "I've told you these things for a purpose, that my joy might be your joy, equal to your joy, and your joy wholly mature." And then later he says, "I'm no longer calling you servants, because servants don't understand what the master's thinking and planning. No, I've named you friends, because I've let you in on everything that I've heard from the Father." I think Jesus is offering genuine and radical equality there. And this takes a vulnerability and an openness, excuse me, it takes a level of vulnerability and openness that can be difficult. But on the other side of difficult often lies our joy. So in our vulnerability, may we find the courage to seek and offer genuine companionship. And in our relationships, may we embody the radical equality and love implied by our name, the Religious Society of Friends.
Well, I was down in Dallas this past week to speak at a pastor's conference, and according to a sign I saw on the way from the airport to the event, the world is ending any day now. The sign said, "Jesus is coming back." The sign didn't say where he had been, just that he's coming back. He's mad, and it isn't going to be pretty when he returns. I would have taken it more seriously, but the sign appeared to have been there several years, and the sense of urgency somewhat diminished. I'm not sure how you remain Christian if your entire theology is predicated on the return of Jesus next Tuesday, and that never happens. Personally, if it were me, I would be discouraged. I've got to hand it to the people who still believe these things. They are persistent, if nothing else. We've been talking about the tenets of Christianity in light of the rise of Christian nationalism in our nation. The retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn gave a speech last week in which he prophesied that a cosmic battle would soon occur in which the forces of God would vanquish the evildoers, by which he meant the liberals, and America would again be a righteous nation led by the pure of heart, by which he meant himself. There were several hundred people at the speech, and they clapped and cheered. When he said that, I saw a picture of them. They were mostly old and overweight. So if they are the forces of God, I think God might lack sufficient manpower. Say what you will about the liberals, they have youth and vigor on their side, and that is not to be dismissed. It's been my experience that two kinds of people look forward to the end times. The first kind are the folks who think they're going to be in charge, that God is going to give them a bump in pay and power from mere mortal to celestial ruler governing with Jesus. I have the feeling Michael Flynn and certain others are angling for those jobs, if in fact such jobs exist. I have my doubts. But these are the people who take a perverse delight in the suffering of others. James Sibley, recent head of the Southern Baptist Convention's mission to the Jews, said in an interview, as terrible as the Holocaust was, it will fade into insignificance in comparison to God's future judgment. There will be the Holocaust of all people who don't accept Jesus. To agree with James Sibley is to accept the notion that compared to God, Hitler was a nice guy. I have little patience for people like that. Folks who are in it for the reward, hoping for personal glory. Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6, verse 2, that people like that who look after themselves and toot their own horn have already earned all the reward they're going to get. But as I said, there are two kinds of people who look forward to the end times, and it is the second group for whom I feel sympathy. These are the folks who don't have anything in this life. No power, no resources, no nothing of anything they need. These are the folks who can't catch a break, who get paid a pittance on Friday and are out of money by Saturday, whose lives are one miserable moment after another. I had neighbors like that growing up. It seemed like every day they lived was tainted by struggle and hardship and bad luck. And I would go over and visit with them sometime on their front porches and just talk with them and listen, mostly listen because I was just so young. But they would talk incessantly about Jesus coming back, and I'd walk away thinking they were crazy. But now I realize they were desperate and overwhelmed and hoping for one single day in their lives free of strife and pain. All they wanted was for the sun to cast a little light on their lives, which it never seemed to do. Their lives were always just cloud and rain. We ought not mock these people or dismiss them as simple-minded. We can doubt their theology, but we dare not mock them for wanting just a dab of what so many of us have in spades. From the day I was born, I've gotten all the justice I've ever needed. I've gotten all the resources I've ever needed, all the support, all the encouragement I've ever needed. I dare not mock someone who pleads with Jesus to return so they can have just a taste of the banquet I've feasted on for years. Wouldn't that be cruel and unkind for me to do that? Of course it would be. The language of end times that we encounter in the Bible is found primarily in three places. The book of Daniel, especially the last half of it in the Old Testament, the 13th chapter in the Gospel of Mark, and the book of Revelation. Those passages have something in common. They were all written during times of great persecution and suffering, when the people of God were harmed greatly by unscrupulous rulers. These passages were written to provide hope to their readers, to remind them as bleak as things seemed. Hold on. Don't lose faith. God will triumph. Your suffering will end. The clouds of injustice will part, and the sun of righteousness will once again shine. Remember this, apocalyptic literature is never written to or by people at the top of the heap. It's always for the people at the bottom who are suffering. It helps us to think of apocalyptic writing as the biblical equivalent of the Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement. It is people crying out for justice, calling upon God, needing to be heard. That its language has been manipulated, misused, and monetized by corrupt preachers and politicians does not lessen the sincerity of those people who desperately yearn for and deserve better times. Well, I don't believe apocalyptic literature is a sound foundation for public policy. I wouldn't, for instance, advocate ignoring the debt ceiling in hopes of hastening a global economic collapse and speeding up the return of Jesus. I do believe the longing for justice that underlies end-time language is something we cannot and should not ignore. The moment we tune out the lament of the poor and the oppressed is the same moment we stop being decent human beings. It's the same moment we stop being decent human beings. If poor people gather in their church and sing and pray for Jesus to return, it is not our place to ridicule their lack of theological sophistication. It is our place to ask them only, how can I lessen your burden? How can I bring a little feast to your famine? I don't know if Jesus will ever arrive on the clouds in celestial majesty. I simply don't know. I tend not to think so. I think he'll come back like this dog I saw at the airport on Friday night down in Dallas. Storm had blown up, and it just shut down the whole airport. Our flight was delayed 3 hours, but it was a miserable 3 hours because you're looking at your phone, seeing if you can't get a room for the night somewhere, and then looking at flights for the next day and seeing that they're full too. So it was just a miserable 3 hours. People were cranky and hungry and tired, complaining, cursing American Airlines under their breath. Children were crying. Mothers and fathers were exasperated. And here was this dog right in the midst of it, this dog whose trainer had fallen asleep. The leash had slipped from her hand, and that dog started making the rounds at gate 39, stopping at every knot of people, shaking hands. It appeared to know only one trick, shaking hands. But if you only know one trick, shaking hands is the right one to know. So it would shake hands, that dog would, then it would lean up against and into people. And within about 10 minutes, that whole gate had gone from surly and moody and cranky to smiling and relaxing and talking with one another, patting the dog. It was a miracle dog. That's the only way I could figure it. A miracle dog, a loaves and fishes kind of dog. It took a little smile, turned it into laughter, and we had 12 basketfuls left over. I think there were probably 20 people who would have taken that dog home if the lady would have let him. It was a wonderful dog. I think that's how Jesus is going to return. not in some cataclysmic burst of fury, but bit by bit, multiplying the good we so timidly offer until all around us is laughter and joy and community with plenty left over for everyone. I had an old theology professor in seminary who was very proper, very proper. He loved Karl Barth. Would give half his lessons in German, and I would just sit there and scratch my head. He's very proper. He wore a three-piece suit to class every day. And I know if I told him that the second coming of Jesus was like a dog, he'd give me an F. But he died last year, that man did. And it takes me great pleasure to realize that he has now learned that Jesus is like unto a border collie at gate C39, moving among us, rubbing against us, leaving us better. Sometimes in life, the people we think should wear the halos never do. And those who we think never will end up somehow shining brightly. It is a miracle of life and something for which I am deeply grateful. To see the presence of God where I least expect it. To see the hands of God in the paws of a dog. Welcoming, inviting, greeting. It is a miracle of life, I tell you, to be alive and to see these things.
Let's pray. 326. Thank you. And if you're able, please stand.
Let's break our bread together on our knees. I saw Beth Given walk in this morning, and I remember years ago over in the old white meeting house when we started talking about building this meeting house. We said, how are we going to raise all that money? And Beth said, we're going to start having breakfast here every Saturday morning, and I'm going to cook them. And so she and Sandy Chenoweth started cooking. Oh, gosh, it was wonderful. And people dropping in $50 and $100 bills for those meals, and I thought we should become a restaurant. The heck with this church stuff, let's just be a restaurant. Put Beth and Sandy in charge of that cooking. Oh, it was good, it was good. And here we are today in our meeting house, which everyone can roll right into or walk right into. Stacy's dad was able to join us because he didn't have to go upstairs to get in this place. All kinds of blessings that we have in our lives when we remember to structure our lives in such a way so that everyone is welcomed into them. This is true not only for buildings, of course, but for our own personal lives. Do you live in such a way so that all who meet you know that they are welcomed into your life, that they are a part of your world without even asking, that your heart and your mind and your spirit is expansive enough, open enough to include not only those you love and know well, but those whom you've never met, but who still need a home and a person and a place to be. So, always remember, friends, always remember that sometimes the best way to accomplish any great good is to break bread together. Amen. Turn and greet friends.